I turned 60 this morning, 60 years old. Not that anyone in my family remembered, unless you count the limp bouquet that showed up at my doorstep around 10:30, dropped off by a delivery boy who looked like he hated every minute of his job. He barely muttered my name, Martha Ellen Whitmore, then shoved the flowers into my hands and walked off without even waiting for a tip. There was no card at first, just drooping carnations in a cellophane sleeve. I turned the stems upside down over the kitchen sink before a small white envelope fluttered out and landed on the counter. Happy birthday, Mom. Love, Daniel and Veronica. That was it. No exclamation point, no signature, no we'll call later, no sorry we couldn't be there. Just 5 words, and not even warm ones. I stood there staring at the envelope while the kettle shrieked behind me. I'd set water to boil for tea like I always did, because rituals are comforting when people are not. I poured the water over a single bag, sat down at the table across from an empty chair, and looked at the sandwich I'd made myself. Turkey and cheddar. A sad little candle stood in the middle of a mini carrot cake I'd picked up yesterday, knowing no one else would think to buy one. At 11:02, my phone rang. It was a video call from Daniel. For a split second, I smiled. Maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe they'd say they were coming by. Maybe there was still a chance. Happy birthday, Mom! Daniel's voice was a little too loud, too enthusiastic, like he was forcing it. Veronica appeared beside him, big sunglasses perched on her head. We tried to call earlier, but the signal was terrible. The background behind them was not their house. Not even close. Wide windows, high ceilings, and what looked very much like a 5-star hotel suite. I narrowed my eyes. Where are you calling from? Oh, just home, Daniel said quickly, glancing at Veronica. Working remotely today. At that moment, a waiter strolled behind them. Yes, a waiter, speaking French, setting down 2 espresso cups. Voilà, madame, monsieur. My heart paused. Interesting, I said slowly. Do coffee shops in your neighborhood usually have Eiffel Tower views? Veronica's face froze. A long silence fell. Then, just like that, the call ended. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. I stared at the screen for a while and then I picked up my tea. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't when I said out loud, "You're in Paris. You used my money to go to Paris." I stood up and walked toward the bookshelf, toward Richard's shelf, the one I hadn't touched in 9 years. The one where, tucked between volumes of dusty case law and Shakespeare, I found the envelope I wasn't supposed to open until I turned 60. And inside it was the key. The envelope was pale ivory, sealed with a thick line of wax and marked only with my name in Richard's unmistakable handwriting. Deliberate, elegant, and slightly too formal for a husband who used to sing show tunes while cooking eggs. I stared at it, the key resting on my palm like it had weight beyond metal. I ran my thumb over the wax. I had found it tucked inside his old copy of The Tempest, tucked so precisely behind the dedication page that it felt theatrical, like Richard had left me a role I didn't know I was meant to play. There was a note beneath the envelope, a single sentence in his handwriting. Do not open until your 60th birthday, not a day before. I sat down on the floor beside the shelf. The key glinted under the lamp, brass, old, cold to the touch. I turned it over again and again in my hand, like maybe it would explain itself. But it didn't. Of course it didn't. Richard always let his words do the explaining. So I broke the seal. The letter inside was 3 pages long, neatly typed, of course, with a signature at the end in blue ink. My heart started pounding before I'd even read the first sentence. My dearest Martha Ellen, if you are reading this, it means you've turned 60. And I am no longer there to wish you a happy birthday. I hope you made tea. I hope the house still smells like books and cinnamon. And I hope, most of all, that you are not alone. But if you are, I feared this might happen. And I prepared. I stopped. I pressed the paper to my lips. His voice was in my head as clear as if he were behind me. I could smell his soap. I could hear his cough. That dry one he never admitted was getting worse. I've been watching Daniel for years. You tried to see the good in him. I tried to believe in that good too. But his choices, his dependence on image, on Veronica's expectations. It worried me more than I let on. So I took steps. Quiet ones. Precautionary ones. The key you found opens the storm cellar beneath the house. Behind the wine racks, you'll find a safe. It's not just a safe for valuables, it's a safe for the truth. What's inside it is yours, Ox, and always has been. But you had to get here on your own. You had to see clearly. That's why I waited until 60. My hands were trembling by the end of the page. I didn't realize I was crying until one tear slid directly onto the second paragraph. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it to my chest, and stood up. I had a storm cellar to unlock. I hadn't been down to the storm cellar in years, not since Richard passed. The stairs creaked the same way they always had, old wood groaning under the weight of memory. It smelled of earth and iron, of damp stone and something older, like secrets had settled here long before me. The wine rack stood exactly where it always had, dusty bottles lined up like soldiers. I ran my fingers along the third row from the bottom, remembering the way Richard used to reach past them to grab the good Pinot when guests came over. The wall behind didn't look special, just panelling over brick, until I noticed the faint seam. A square. No handle, no numbers. I reached for the key in my pocket. My hand hesitated, just for a moment. Then I slid the brass into the lock. It turned with a weighty click that echoed far too loudly in the quiet. Behind the door was a safe, plain grey metal with another keyhole and a dial. The second key, smaller, colder, was tucked into the back of Richard's letter. This one opened smoothly, like the safe had been waiting for me all this time. Inside were folders. Thick, manila folders, some stamped confidential, some marked in Richard's familiar handwriting. One said, property, Conway County. Another said, investment transfers, private holdings. Another, to be reviewed by MEW only. And then there was a black envelope, sleek, unmarked except for one thing, a business card paper-clipped to the front. Edgar Tomlinson, Financial Legal Advisory, Private Executor Services, Private Cell, number printed in clean block text. I sat back on the floor, the folder open across my knees. There were ledgers inside, handwritten notes, receipts from places I'd never heard of, rental properties, land deeds, accounts registered under names I didn't recognize, except I did. My grandmother's maiden name, a company Richard had once joked about. Nothing was by accident. The numbers staggered me. Hundreds of thousands, then millions. Not theoretical investments, real money, real assets, hidden. Not from me, but from the world Daniel lived in. The world where he assumed everything was his, simply because he was the only child left. My breath caught when I saw a familiar document, the deed to our house, but not in our names. It had been transferred into a trust. My name was listed as sole beneficiary, but the trustee wasn't Daniel. It was Edgar Tomlinson. I stared at the card in my hand, his name, his number, his title. A stranger, but not really. Richard had known him, trusted him. My hand trembled as I reached for the old rotary phone mounted on the cellar wall. It was time to make the call. I didn't expect him to answer on the first ring. Edgar Tomlinson speaking. His voice was low, clipped, and calm, the kind of voice that didn't rush unless absolutely necessary. I held the receiver a little tighter, suddenly unsure of what to say. Hello. This is Martha Ellen Whitmore, I said slowly, my voice echoing off the stone walls of the cellar. I believe my husband, Richard Whitmore, left instructions to contact you. A pause. Not long, but heavy. Then, a quiet exhale. Mrs. Whitmore, I've been expecting this call for 10 years. My knees almost gave out. I leaned against the wine rack to stay upright. I found the letter, I whispered, and the key. I opened the safe. Another pause, softer this time. Then you're ready. Ready for what? I asked. Edgar's voice lowered. Ready to know the truth about everything your husband prepared, and everything your son doesn't know exists. My stomach turned, but I didn't interrupt. I needed to hear it. I needed someone, anyone, to say it out loud. I've been the silent executor of Richard's private trust since the year before he passed, Edgar continued. He asked me to oversee a parallel estate, one not included in the will Daniel handled after Richard's death. Your husband was meticulous, Mrs. Whitmore. He knew how to mask assets legally. Everything was above board, but deliberately hidden. Hidden from my own son, I said quietly. Not to punish him, Edgar said gently, to test him. Richard hoped Daniel would prove himself responsible, that he'd care for you, not just manage your accounts. He's in Paris right now, I said flatly, with his wife, celebrating my 60th birthday on my retirement money. He lied to my face about it. Edgar didn't answer right away. When he spoke again, his voice had lost the professional distance. I'm truly sorry, Martha Ellen, but it means Richard was right to take precautions. The time has come to transfer control, full control, of the trust and the holdings to you. I don't know how to do any of this, I admitted. I'm not like Richard. I'm not a lawyer or an accountant. I was a literature teacher. You don't need to be a lawyer, Edgar said. You just need to be the woman Richard trusted you to be. He left instructions, names, options. All of it's ready. We just needed one thing to trigger the process. What's that? Your voice, Martha Ellen. You saying, I'm ready. The silence between us felt sacred. And then, without really meaning to, I said it. I'm ready. Edgar met me the next morning at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd sat just yesterday with a slice of carrot cake and a cold heart. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, and carried a thin black briefcase that looked like it had secrets sewn into its lining. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Just opened the case, removed a stack of files, and said, "This is the paper trail." I hadn't expected it to be so thick. "Let's start here," he said, sliding a file toward me. "This is your joint account with Daniel. Technically, you're the primary account holder, but for the past 7 years, your son has had power of attorney." I signed that, I said, my voice brittle. After Richard passed, Daniel said he'd help with the bills. I didn't want to deal with numbers. Edgar didn't comment. He simply turned the file toward me and pointed. This withdrawal here, $23,000, labeled as foundation maintenance. Any idea what that is? I blinked. We don't have a foundation. He nodded once, flipped the page. Here, $12,000 for property assessment. There's no paperwork to support it. No appraisal, no receipts. And this, he tapped another entry. $800 monthly, recurring, labeled as home care services. I don't have a caregiver, I whispered. I do my own grocery shopping. I drive myself. Edgar leaned back slightly, giving me space. There are also payments to something called Whitmore Global Holdings, registered in Nevada. Owner listed as Veronica Whitmore. My breath caught. She has a business, I asked, the words tasting like disbelief. She's always said she's between projects. It's not a real company, Edgar said. It's a shell, a way to reroute money and make it harder to trace. My hands were cold now. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. All this time, I thought I was just bad with money, that my savings were running low because of groceries, insurance, utilities. Edgar's voice softened. That's what financial abuse often feels like self-doubt. I stared at the files in front of me, line after line, transaction after transaction, restaurant names I'd never heard of, hotels I'd never stayed in. Jewelry stores, private car rentals, golf memberships. He slid over one final sheet. Total unauthorized withdrawals across 9 years, $346,812.14. The numbers blurred in front of me. I couldn't cry. Not yet. The betrayal hadn't fully reached my bones. It was still too new, too loud. But one thing had never been clearer. My son had been robbing me in plain sight, and I'd thanked him for it. I couldn't sleep that night. The files were still on the table, stacked with careful precision by Edgar before he left. I hadn't moved them. I hadn't even turned off the lamp. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it knew something was unraveling, and it was trying not to interfere. I stood in the hallway in my robe, barefoot, staring down toward Richard's study. I hadn't stepped inside that room in almost a decade. He'd kept it orderly, always. Every book in its place, every pen capped. Even the framed photos were level, like they'd been measured with a ruler. I used to tease him about it. Your brain runs like a courtroom, Richard. Even your chaos has structure. He would smile, kiss my forehead and say, somebody has to keep this ship afloat, Martha Ellen. You're the soul. I'll be the spine. Now the door creaked open like it too, wasn't sure it should be touched. The room smelled like old leather, wood polish, and the ghost of his cologne. Sandalwood and something darker, something still male, still him. I ran my hand along the edge of his desk. The surface was clean except for one small crack in the varnish where he always tapped his wedding ring when he was thinking. I sat down slowly in his chair, closed my eyes, let my hands rest on the arms where his had been so many times before, and I heard his voice, not aloud, not like a ghost, but the memory of it, full-bodied and stubborn. Don't ever let kindness make you blind, Martha Ellen, not even with Daniel. Especially not with Daniel. He'd said that the night after Daniel had forged his name on a check. Small, stupid, 20 years ago. I had begged him not to press charges. He's a teenager, Richard. He doesn't know what he's doing. He knows, Richard had said. He always knows. But you're the one who keeps giving him the benefit of the doubt, and I love that about you. God help me, I love that softness in you. But it can be dangerous. At the time, I thought he was being harsh. Now I realized he was being protective. He hadn't stopped loving Daniel, but he had stopped trusting him. And instead of trying to fix it with confrontation, Richard had quietly set safeguards. Legal, tactical, unemotional. That was his version of love. Not speeches, not drama, preparation. And me? I had spent 10 years thinking his silence meant peace. But now I knew. It meant strategy. Richard hadn't abandoned me. He had armed me. I dialed Daniel's number just after 9 the next morning. I waited until the light through the kitchen window had turned soft and yellow, like it used to be on school days when I packed his lunch and reminded him not to forget his math book. Now I was calling my son not to speak as a mother but as a woman with questions. The phone rang twice before he answered. Mom. His voice was syrupy sweet, overly cheerful. I was just about to call you back. We had such a weird signal yesterday. I think the call dropped. Oh, I said lightly. I wondered about that. A pause. So, how are you feeling? Did you get the flowers? I did. They're on the table. A little wilted, but thoughtful nonetheless. He chuckled, clearly missing the irony. Veronica picked them out. She said carnations are cheerful. Yes, I murmured. They die slowly. He either didn't hear me or pretended not to. Anyway, how was your day? Did you do anything fun? Made a sandwich, I said, keeping my tone feather light. Watched the rain come in. Very Parisian. Another pause. Parisian? He echoed too quickly. Why would you say that? Oh, I thought I saw something in your background yesterday. Looked very much like a Paris cafe. There was a beat of silence. Too still. Too tight. Oh, that? That was a filter on the app, he said, laughing nervously. Veronica was playing with backgrounds. I see, I replied, folding a napkin slowly in my lap. So, you're not in Paris? No, of course not. Just home. You know me, working from the kitchen table. Is that where they serve you espresso with a voila? He stumbled. We tried one of those new neighborhood services. Fancy delivery, like a pop-up bistro thing. Ah, I said softly. How modern. He cleared his throat. Anyway, I was thinking I should check in on your finances again soon. Make sure everything's running smoothly. I noticed some of the transfers flagged. Could have been a glitch. I smiled without meaning to. Transfers, I repeated. You're still monitoring the accounts? Of course, he said as if it were obvious. I mean, it's my responsibility, right? And if access was suddenly revoked? Silence, then forced laughter. Why would that happen? I didn't answer, because that wasn't the point anymore. The point was that he never asked how I was sleeping, or if I'd had company, or if I was lonely. All he cared about was control. I let the silence sit just a second longer, then said sweetly, We should talk again soon, Daniel. There's a lot to go over. Sure, Mum. Whenever you're ready. Oh, darling. I already am. By noon, Edgar was back at my house. But this time, he wasn't alone. A second car pulled up behind his, sleek and dark, the kind of vehicle that didn't announce itself but somehow made the neighbours close their blinds. A woman stepped out first, sharp black blazer, low heels, and eyes that scanned my porch like she was calculating risk factors. Mrs. Whitmore, Edgar said as I opened the door. This is Marianne Cruz. She's with Sentinel Private Protection. Discreet, reliable, and very good at keeping people honest. Protection? I blinked. Do I need that? We always plan for the worst, Edgar said gently, just in case Daniel reacts poorly to losing access. Marianne nodded once. You'll have a direct line to me 24/7. No uniforms, no patrol cars parked in front. Just presence. Quiet deterrence. We'll install a new lock system today. I swallowed. This was real. This wasn't about suspicion anymore. This was about preparing for fallout. I didn't think it would come to this, I murmured. No one ever does, Edgar said. But you'd be surprised how often it does, especially when money's involved. I stepped aside, letting them in. My living room felt smaller now, like the furniture itself had overheard too much and was curling inward. Edgar handed me another folder, thinner this time. I've also scheduled a meeting tomorrow with our attorney, Helen Saunders. She specialises in elder financial abuse and fiduciary breach. If you'd prefer someone else, we can... No, I said quickly. I trust your judgment. He nodded, then added, I've also reached out to a forensic financial analyst. Her name is Vivian Tran, former IRS Investigations Division. She doesn't miss a thing. I sat down slowly, the names swirling in my head like chess pieces. So, I'm building a team now, I said quietly. A lawyer, a bodyguard, an accountant. You're not building a team, Edgar said, his voice firm but kind. You're taking your power back. That word, power, felt strange in my mouth. I had spent so long giving it away in small pieces, trusting, explaining, excusing, smiling to keep peace, nodding to keep the room quiet. Now I was installing locks. Now I was drawing lines. Let's do it, I said finally. Whatever you think needs to be done. Let's not wait. Marianne gave me a slight nod, professional approval. And Edgar, for the first time, allowed himself the smallest smile. I think Richard would have liked this version of you, Martha Ellen. I looked out the window as the locksmith arrived. I think I do too. Vivian Tran arrived exactly on time, not a minute early, not a second late. She stepped into my living room like she'd been there before, setting her briefcase down with the precision of a surgeon preparing for operation. She didn't smile. She didn't ask about my day. She simply extended her hand and said, Let's begin. Her voice was low and even. with no excess. She wore no jewelry, no scent, no ornament, only purpose. Edgar introduced us and then quietly disappeared into the kitchen. Vivian opened her case, pulled out a slim laptop, and within seconds, my life, or rather the parts Daniel had touched, was blinking across her screen in green and red numbers. "I've reviewed the data Edgar provided," she said. "It was enough to trace patterns. But I'll need your signature on this release form to access the full history through your bank." I signed without hesitation. She didn't nod, didn't thank me. She just kept going. Preliminary review indicates consistent fund misappropriation dating back 9 years. The majority masked as property renovations, lifestyle investments, and trust reallocations. I furrowed my brow. "But we didn't renovate anything. Not since Richard passed." Vivian tapped a key. "That's because the renovations were billed to addresses you don't own. 3 of them." My stomach dropped. 3? "One in Aspen," she continued, "one in Miami, and one registered under a shell corporation in Vancouver. All 3 appear to have ties to Daniel or Patricia through indirect ownership structures." She pulled up photos, glossy kitchens, infinity pools, private terraces. I stared at the screen. That was my garden club's entire yearly budget, sitting in someone else's marble bathroom. Vivian moved on, page after page, year after year. Spa retreats, tuition payments that never came from the education trusts, private flights coded as family business travel. "And you're sure this is all traceable?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes," she said, her fingers flying, "and prosecutable." She tapped another key and turned the laptop toward me. The total number at the bottom. I couldn't breathe for a moment. $386,209. Not theoretical money. My money. Money I saved clipping coupons, saying no to dresses I loved, skipping dinners out so Daniel could attend the camp he insisted all his friends were going to. "That's not oversight," I whispered. "That's betrayal." Vivian didn't respond. She didn't have to. Betrayal had its own silence, and she'd learned to leave room for it. I didn't cry right away. Not when Vivian closed her laptop, not when Edgar returned with tea, not when they both quietly excused themselves, leaving me in the soft hush of my own home. It wasn't until I went upstairs, past the picture frames on the staircase, past the embroidered quote in the hallway that read, "Love builds a home," and stepped into Daniel's old room, untouched for years, that something cracked. The wallpaper was still blue with tiny stars. The bookshelf still held the same worn copy of Charlotte's Web, pages dog-eared from bedtime readings I used to dramatize with silly voices. On the dresser sat a model airplane we built together the summer he turned 11. I remember how his fingers trembled with focus, how he beamed when it finally flew crooked across the yard. He used to cry when I left the room, cling to my legs when I dropped him off at school. He used to leave me notes in crayon. "I love you, bigger than space." Signed, Daniel Richard Whitmore, age 6. That boy, that sweet, complicated, deeply feeling boy. Where did he go? I sat on the edge of his old bed, the mattress still dented in the shape of childhood sleep, and stared at the floor until it blurred. The betrayal wasn't just about money, it wasn't just theft, it was erasure. The son who once ran barefoot through sprinklers now flew first class on my dime without blinking. The boy who used to ask if I was okay when I sighed too loud now watched me age from afar, silent as my world narrowed. How long had he practiced smiling while lying? How many times had I told myself I must have misunderstood? I remembered our phone call last Christmas. I'd asked if they could visit. He said things were tight. "Flights are expensive, Mum," he'd said. "Maybe next year." That same week, Patricia posted pictures from Maui. I told myself it must have been a work trip. Maybe she won it in a raffle. Maybe I just didn't understand how things worked anymore. No, I understood perfectly now. I pressed my palms to my eyes, but the tears finally came. hot and slow as if my heart was only now catching up to the truth. He'd been draining me, month after month, while calling me sweetheart and thanking me for supporting the family. I thought I was helping my son survive, but all along, I was financing my own abandonment. The next morning, Edgar picked me up just after sunrise. The air was heavy with southern mist, curling around the tires as we drove through winding roads outside of town. He didn't speak much, just glanced at me now and then, like he wasn't sure if I was going to shatter or scream. I didn't do either. I just stared out the window, waiting to meet the version of my husband I never knew existed. We stopped in front of a long iron gate wrapped in ivy. Edgar keyed in a code. The gate opened slowly, like it had been waiting years to move again. Beyond it lay a modest brick house, not grand, not flashy, but solid, stately, the kind of place that whispered of history and secrets. "This belonged to Richard," Edgar said quietly as we stepped out. "Purchased under a separate LLC 16 years ago. Everything inside was curated by him, hidden from public records, even from you. For protection," I swallowed. "Protection from what?" He didn't answer, just handed me a heavy brass key. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and old pages. Sunlight fell in slanted ribbons through the windows. And the silence, it was not the silence of neglect, but of intention. A waiting silence. Room after room, shelf after shelf. And I began to understand. Leather-bound volumes lined the walls. First editions, handwritten margins, gilded spines, antique clocks, restored and ticking softly in rhythm. A mahogany desk I instantly recognized as Richard's style stood in the study, and on it, my name carved into a small brass plaque. I ran my fingers across the desk edge, my throat tightening. He'd made space for me here, long before I knew I'd need it. Edgar opened a cabinet and removed a binder. "These," he said, "are the assets, property deeds, appraisals, authenticated valuations." I sat slowly and began flipping through. A brownstone in Boston, a vineyard stake in Sonoma, a storage vault in New York City housing preserved manuscripts including letters from Emily Dickinson. Antique jewellery I'd never seen. A painting attributed, quietly, but confidently, to Mary Cassatt. All listed under blind trusts, all managed with painstaking care. "This isn't just money," I whispered. "This is history." Edgar nodded. He knew one day you might need a life untouched by them, a foundation not built on their permission. My husband hadn't just seen the storm coming, he'd built me a lighthouse, and for the first time in years, I felt the light. I stood in the quiet of the study long after Edgar left, the binder still open before me, pages full of valuations, signatures, coordinates, tangible proof that someone had believed in me, fiercely and without question. But belief, I realized, wasn't enough anymore. Not without action. Not with what they'd done. I stared at the painting across from the desk. Soft pastel strokes, a mother reading to her child. I didn't know the artist, but I knew the moment. I had lived that moment many times with Daniel nestled beside me, tracing the words with his tiny finger and asking if I thought dragons could be real. I remembered that boy. But I didn't know the man who had taken from me so easily, so shamelessly. I closed the binder, steady now, not shaken. There was too much clarity in me for fear to get in the way. I would not let lawyers sit in a sterile room and quietly clean up the mess. I wanted them to see me, to look in my eyes and know what they'd done. I picked up the phone and called Edgar. "I want to speak to Daniel and Patricia, in person." He paused. "Martha, are you sure that's wise?" "No," I said plainly, "but it's necessary." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Understood. I'll make the arrangements, with protection in place." I hung up and sat in silence, the old clock ticking in the background like a metronome to my resolve. I didn't want to fight. Not truly. I didn't want to hurt my son. But I also wasn't going to disappear into gratitude just because I had something again. I wanted the truth said out loud, not in legalese, not behind closed doors. Out loud, with their eyes open and mine unblinking. I stood and looked at myself in the mirror above the mantel. The same face, but something in the set of the jaw had shifted. I looked awake. They had treated me like a fading figure, a funding source with soft opinions. They'd never once imagined I might take the reins, that I might fight back. I smiled slightly, no joy in it, only readiness. "I'll give you one meeting," I whispered aloud, as if they were already standing there. "And in that room, you'll see exactly who I am." I turned off the light, closed the study door behind me, and for the first time since my birthday, I didn't feel like I was walking alone. The next morning, just as the sun began to warm the porch railings, my phone buzzed. A message. From Lillian. Not a forward, not a photo. A real message. Long, nervous, clumsy in the way only honesty can be. "Grandma, I don't know if you're okay. I hope you're okay. I didn't go on the trip. I told Dad I had finals, but the truth is, I didn't want to. Something didn't feel right." I sat down slowly, the phone trembling just a little in my hands. I didn't know everything, but I knew enough. The way he talks about you sometimes, it makes me feel sick. You've always been the one person who sees me, who listens without judging, and I couldn't smile and pretend while they used you like that. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. My throat tightened. I hadn't realized how badly I needed one clean, safe voice in all of this. There was more. I've been thinking a lot lately about the stories you used to tell me about the library and the way you talked about preserving books like they were living things. I've been looking into archival science programs. I didn't even know that was a real path until you made it sound magical. I laughed softly. A real startled laugh. She remembered. She remembered me. "I'd like to come visit if that's okay, just to talk. I miss you." I didn't hesitate. My fingers flew across the screen. "Come today if you can. I'll make lemon tea the way you like." "I need to see your face, Lillian." I stared out the window for a long moment, phone still in my lap. Somewhere beyond the trees, preparations were being made. Edgar was laying the groundwork for confrontation. Lawyers, documents, numbers. But this message, this was something different. This was truth without bitterness, love without agenda. Within the hour, I heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. When I opened the door, there she was, Lillian, 21 and freckled, with hair always slightly undone and eyes too big for her face. She looked at me for a moment like she was trying to memorize my expression. Then she hugged me. The kind of hug you don't give if you think someone is fragile. It was firm, solid, real. "I'm so glad you're okay," she whispered. I didn't answer right away, because for the first time in weeks, I realized maybe I actually was. We sat on the porch for hours, the afternoon sun stretching long fingers across the floorboards. I poured us each a second cup of lemon tea, the way I always had when she was a little girl. Extra honey, no lemon peel. Lillian listened without interrupting. I told her everything. About the birthday, about the stolen money, about the safe beneath the house, and the letter tucked inside her grandfather's favourite volume of poetry. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't soften it either. She was old enough for the truth, and more than that, she deserved it. When I told her about the Jenkins archive, the secret library, the properties, the trust, her eyes widened, but not in the way I expected. Not with greed, with something else. Wonder. "A whole library," she whispered. "And Grandpa built it. In secret?" I nodded. "Not just to preserve books, Lillian. To preserve values, justice, history, voices that were nearly lost to time." She set her mug down carefully, like her hands were suddenly full of meaning. "And he left it to you?" Yes, with instructions that, when I was ready, I'd become its curator, not just a guardian of books, but a steward of the mission. Lillian leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the trees beyond the porch. A breeze caught her hair and pulled it gently across her cheek. He always believed in you, didn't he? I smiled, though it hurt a little. He believed in who I used to be, and who I forgot I was. She turned to me, more serious than I'd ever seen her. Grandma, I want to help. I mean it. I want to be part of this. The archive. The curation. Everything. I searched her face, not for approval but for certainty. You understand this isn't about money, I said. That's not what this legacy is. Lillian nodded firmly. I don't want money. I want meaning. My chest tightened, a quiet pride blooming in places I thought had gone dormant. That's what your grandfather wanted, I whispered. That this wouldn't end with me. That someone younger, someone who understood why it matters, would carry it forward. She reached over and covered my hand with hers. Then let me be that someone. The words weren't dramatic, they weren't even loud, but they carried weight, real weight. In that moment, I didn't see the little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read Austen aloud. I saw the woman she was becoming, and I saw the future of the archive, not locked away in legal trusts or vaults, but alive, walking barefoot on my porch, asking to hold the torch. The house felt different that morning, still quiet but not empty. There was a weight in the air, not heavy like sorrow, no, more like stillness before a storm. But I wasn't afraid of the thunder anymore. Tomorrow they'd be home. Andrew, Meredith, the boys, with their suitcases full of duty-free perfume and luxury guilt. I'd already asked Edgar and Vivian to be here, along with the attorney. Documents were signed, timelines set. But today was mine. I moved through each room with care. Not as a victim, not anymore. As a curator of my own space, as someone reclaiming the ground beneath her feet. The first thing I did was take down the photographs in the hallway. Not all of them, just the ones that made my stomach turn when I passed by. Andrew's graduation photo. The family cruise where I paid for 6 rooms and got 6 days of being ignored. I wrapped them gently. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't cruel. But I no longer owed them space on my walls. In their place, I hung older memories. My wedding photo, Richard in that ill-fitting navy suit, grinning like a boy who'd just stolen a crown. The photo of Lillian and me on the beach when she was 7, her curls full of sand, both of us laughing so hard the frame blurred. And one more, a new one. A printout of the message Lillian had sent me, folded neatly in a shadow box, just above the tea cabinet. I dusted each surface with care, not because I was hosting, but because I was reclaiming this place. Not as a museum of a life I'd lost, but as a living testament to the one I was beginning again. I even lit a candle in the kitchen, lavender and cedarwood, the one Richard always said smelled like strength wrapped in calm. Later, I sat in the living room with no TV, no radio, no noise, just the sound of my own breath and the birds arguing in the trees outside. I'd thought grief would consume me. That betrayal would leave me hollow. But here I was, fully present, still here, still standing, still mine. The silence wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace, and tomorrow. When they walked through that door, expecting the same old mother, the same ATM wrapped in an apron, they'd meet someone they hadn't seen in a long, long time. Me, the real me. No explanations, no drama, just quiet, undeniable strength. I heard the tires crunch the gravel before I saw them. Their SUV pulled into the driveway exactly on schedule. Andrew always was obsessed with punctuality, especially when there was something he wanted. From the kitchen window, I saw Meredith first, stepping out in heels far too thin for gravel, her designer sunglasses still on despite the cloud cover. Then Andrew, tired but not with travel, tired with panic, with entitlement colliding headfirst into consequences. I didn't go out to greet them. I stayed seated in Richard's old chair by the fireplace. That's where they would find me. Not frantic in the doorway, not bustling to welcome them home, but composed, settled, ready. The front door swung open before they knocked. "Mom?" Andrew's voice called out sharp. "What's going on with the accounts? My card's been declined 3 times." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence thicken. Meredith appeared behind him, dragging a suitcase as if she were returning from war. They both stopped when they saw me sitting there. Not frazzled, not tearful, just waiting. "Hello, Andrew." "Meredith," I said calmly, folding my hands in my lap. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, storming forward. "There's obviously been some kind of mistake. We're locked out of everything." "No," I said, my voice soft but steady. "There's no mistake." He froze mid-step. "What do you mean, no mistake?" "I mean," I continued, "that I know everything. The withdrawals, the forged permissions. The accounts you opened in my name. The money that paid for that trip." Meredith's mouth opened, but no words came out. "You've misunderstood," Andrew tried, but the rehearsed calm in his voice cracked. "We were managing things, like Dad asked us to." "Richard asked me," I corrected, "and he never asked for this." He took a step forward, gesturing wildly. "You don't understand how these things work." "No," I said, rising to my feet. "You don't understand. You don't understand that your mother is not a fool, that she's not a vessel to be drained at your convenience, that she has help now, real help, and a purpose that goes far beyond writing checks and pretending not to notice." The silence between us stretched. "I want access restored," Andrew snapped, defiant now. "We can fix this if you'll just be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I replied, my gaze fixed on his, for the first time in years. And then I sat back down, peacefully, because I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard anymore. I had already taken back everything that mattered. We gathered around the long oak dining table, the one Richard and I had picked out 30 years ago, when life still felt like something we were building together. Now it had become a courtroom of sorts. Vivian, the forensic accountant, sat to my left, cool and meticulous, her laptop already open and files stacked in front of her. To my right was Carla Morgan, my attorney, not aggressive, not loud, but no one ever had to ask her to repeat herself. Across from me, Andrew sat rigid, arms crossed, his jaw tight with defiance. Meredith slouched beside him, her phone clutched like a talisman, eyes flitting between us all like a cornered animal. Vivian began. Calmly, precisely. "In the past 9 years, a total of $468,000 have been siphoned from Martha Evans's retirement and investment accounts. These were disguised as home maintenance expenses, family gifts, and discretionary allowances, none of which were authorized beyond the initial verbal agreement that funds be used responsibly." She clicked to a new page. Charts, graphs, color-coded shame. Meredith snorted. "This is ridiculous. You agreed to help us. You always said—" I interrupted, "that I trusted you. That was my mistake." Andrew leaned forward. "You're acting like we stole from you." "You did," Carla said simply, "and we have the documentation." Vivian slid a file across the table. "If you'd like to review the purchase breakdowns, we can start with the week you renovated your garage for $26,000, while simultaneously booking a private villa in Tuscany." Meredith pushed back her chair with a loud scrape. "Oh, come on. This is disgusting. We are your family. You think strangers know you better than we do?" I said nothing, just looked at her. She stood, pacing now. "You're really going to turn this into a witch hunt? Over what? A few gifts? A few family vacations? A few years of my life," I said, finally speaking. "Spent shrinking so that you could expand." Andrew's shoulders slumped slightly. "Mom," he began softer. "We didn't think you'd ever notice. It wasn't meant to be cruel," I offered. "It was meant to be convenient." No one spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed hesitant to tick. Then Meredith broke. "This is insane," she hissed. "You're punishing us. Embarrassing us." I looked at her the way I once looked at broken heirlooms, with quiet sadness. "No, Meredith, you did that yourselves." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply let the truth sit there, unbending and permanent, like the foundation beneath this house. And, for once, they had nothing left to say. Carla closed the folder with a quiet, deliberate motion, then looked up, directly at Andrew. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "You have 24 hours to respond. After that, we proceed with filing formal charges for financial elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement." Andrew stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "What charges? You're going to take your own son to court?" His laugh was sharp, brittle. "Do you even hear how insane that sounds?" "I hear exactly how it sounds," I replied evenly. "And for the first time in years, it sounds right." Meredith scoffed. "She wouldn't dare. This is just a scare tactic." Carla raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to see the complaint? It's already drafted and signed." Vivian silently slid another document across the table. It was a summary of restitution options. Full repayment in structured installments or asset liquidation. The numbers were highlighted. Cold. Exact. I let them read in silence for a moment before speaking. "Here's what happens next," I said. "You sign this agreement. You commit, in writing, to repaying every dollar you've taken. You give up any access to my finances, permanently. You acknowledge your actions." Andrew looked at me like I was someone he'd never met. "And if we don't?" Meredith asked, her tone suddenly small. "Then we take it public," Carla said. "Criminal charges, a court date, press, if necessary. Your name's on a docket next to the words elder abuse. And yes, I will testify." Meredith went pale. Andrew rubbed his temple. "You really think this is justice?" "I think," I said slowly, "this is accountability. Something neither of you have faced for a very long time." He shook his head. "This'll ruin us." "You should have thought of that before stealing from someone you claim to love." I stood then, not to intimidate, but because I needed to feel taller than the ache inside me. "I will not be manipulated by guilt, not anymore. You can call your own lawyers, you can try to twist this however you like, but the facts won't change." Carla rose beside me. "We'll give you till tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Meredith opened her mouth, but Andrew raised a hand. "Don't," he whispered. For the first time that evening, I saw it. Not rage, not entitlement. Fear. He was starting to understand. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a line in the sand, and they had already stepped too far past it. The air in the repository felt different that morning. Not heavy, but charged, like something sacred was about to begin. I had asked for a quiet meeting, just the board, myself, and one special guest. Lily sat beside me at the long oak table, hands folded, eyes calm but bright. There was nervousness in her posture, yes, but also something deeper. Readiness. Dr. Evelyn Morse, the head archivist, cleared her throat gently. "Mrs. Whitaker, are you sure you'd like to proceed with this appointment today?" I smiled. "I am. This has been in motion far longer than most of us realize." Lily turned toward me, a question in her eyes. I reached for the folder in front of me and slid it across the table toward her. "This," I said, "is your letter of appointment. Effective immediately, you are now the assistant curator of the Whitaker Literary Archive. Your duties will include research assistance, catalogue review, and public programming support. You'll also begin training under Dr. Morse in archival preservation." Lily blinked, then looked at the letter as if afraid it might vanish. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, sweetheart," I said softly. You've already spoken loud and clear. When everyone else disappeared, you showed up. Not just for me, but for what matters. Dr. Morse smiled. We've been watching your work, Lily. Your notes on the Lamont manuscripts were precise. Your questions about binding and papermaking last week, thoughtful and nuanced. You have an instinct for this. Lily flushed with pride. Thank you. I mean, thank you all. Don't thank us, I said, placing my hand over hers. Thank yourself. You earned this. For a moment there was silence, the good kind, the kind that stretches with meaning. Then the board chair, Mr. Carrow, spoke. This archive is built on values, he said. Integrity, stewardship, truth. What you've shown in recent weeks proves you understand those values more than most. We're honoured to have you. Lily's eyes welled, and I saw her bite her lip to steady her breath. I squeezed her hand. This isn't just about books, I told her later as we walked through the temperature-controlled aisles. It's about legacy. Not what we leave behind, but who we trust to carry it forward. She nodded. I won't let you down. You already haven't. At the end of the hallway, I reached up and turned the small brass key still hanging from my neck. The private vault opened slowly. Come on, I said. Let me show you the rarest volumes. You'll need to know them by heart. One day they'll be your responsibility. And just like that, the future stepped into the present, full of quiet strength and a new kind of hope. They arrived 5 minutes early, which told me everything I needed to know. Andrew always used to be late, on purpose, as if to remind me I was never the priority. But today they were early and silent. Not a word between them as they entered the study. The papers were already laid out on the desk, neatly organised, no theatrics, no drama, just columns, figures, signatures, reality. Victor stood at my side, so did Catherine. Lily lingered near the hallway, not wanting to intrude but unwilling to leave. Her presence was my spine. Patricia sat first. Her hands were stiff, lips pressed so tightly together they'd gone pale. Andrew remained standing, eyes darting between me and the documents. He looked older, not just tired, but hollowed out in places no sleep could fix. This is excessive, Patricia said finally, her voice too smooth, too rehearsed. You've made your point. This isn't about a point, I replied, meeting her gaze. It's about the truth, and boundaries, and consequences. Andrew cleared his throat. We've reviewed everything with our counsel. We'll sign, under protest. You don't get to protest, Catherine said evenly. But yes, sign, or don't. Your choice. He looked at her, then at me. You really mean to go through with this? I already have, I said softly. You just arrived for the final page. He reached for the pen. The sound of signatures landing on paper was sharper than I expected. Final. Irrevocable. One copy for me. One for them. One for the trust. Patricia didn't speak again. Her eyes stayed on the floor. When it was done, she stood abruptly, like the chair burned her. I suppose we're finished here, she said. You're finished with my finances, yes, I answered. But family is another matter entirely. That, we'll see. Andrew lingered behind her. Is there really no way back? I studied him for a long moment. There's always a way, but it won't look like the past. You'll have to come towards something new, respect, truth, accountability. He nodded once, and left without a word. The door clicked shut behind them, and I exhaled. Victor looked over. Are you all right? No, I said, but I'm free, and that matters more. Catherine collected the documents. They know now, she said. There's no pretending anymore. No, I whispered, feeling the stillness settle. They finally see it. I'm not the woman they thought I was. Not someone to manage or silence or dismiss. From the hall, Lily stepped into view. You were incredible, she said. I shook my head. I was just finished. And when you're finished with being used, something else begins. I touched the brass key at my neck. Now, I said, let's begin. 1 year later, I stood beneath the grand chandelier of the Westbridge Cultural Hall, the brass key from the vault resting just above my heart. The room was warm with conversation and candlelight, filled with scholars, curators, donors, and a surprising number of familiar faces. I never imagined I'd be the one at the centre of a gala. I'd always been the wife behind the man, the mother behind the table, the grandmother behind the camera. But not tonight. Tonight, they came to see me. I spotted Lily across the room in a deep green gown, talking animatedly with one of the visiting archivists. Her eyes sparkled with that fierce light I'd seen the first time she held one of Richard's original field notes. That moment I knew she was the true heir, not to wealth, but to legacy. Victor appeared at my side, a glass of champagne in each hand. They say the Jenkins Wing is now the most visited exhibit on the eastern seaboard. I'd settle for it being loved, I smiled. Popularity fades, but care, that lasts. Your speech is in 20 minutes, he said gently. You can still back out if you want. No, I said, setting down the glass. It's time. The dais had never seemed so tall. As I walked toward it, past the faces that once doubted me, past the children of old friends, past even Andrew and Patricia standing stiffly at the back, I didn't feel nervous. I felt rooted, like I was standing in the right soil after years of drought. I took the microphone. Good evening, I began, letting the warmth settle into my voice. I wasn't always the kind of woman who stood at podiums. I spent most of my life sitting in the background until someone tried to erase me from my own story. The silence grew deep. A year ago, I reclaimed it, not out of anger, but out of clarity. My husband, Richard Jenkins, saw what I didn't. He left behind not just books and funds, but faith. Faith that I could carry something forward. I paused, looking at Lily. And now, we build. Together. Not just a collection, but a space for integrity, for curiosity, for women who've been underestimated for far too long. The room broke into applause. When I stepped down, Lily was waiting. You didn't just reclaim your story, she said, eyes bright. You rewrote the ending. No, I smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. We're still writing. And the next chapter, it's yours to begin. They say when you speak from the heart, people listen. Not because your voice is loud, but because the silence around your truth becomes impossible to ignore. I stood at the podium, the soft golden light catching the brass key at my neck, and I took a long breath. The kind you take before something that changes you. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice calm, unhurried. I was not supposed to be here. Not because of illness or accident or any of the natural things that steal time from us, but because not long ago I was quietly being erased. The room shifted, a rustle of chairs, of breath held. Not all erasures come in one swoop. Sometimes they arrive slowly, in small conversations where your opinion isn't asked, in birthdays forgotten, in signatures forged, in savings siphoned, in your role shrinking, so gradually you don't realize you've disappeared. I scanned the audience, pausing just enough. But I am here. Not in spite of my age, but because of it. Not because I was rescued, but because I remembered who I was. A murmur of agreement. My husband Richard saw it before I did. He prepared for it. Left me pieces. A key, a letter, a legacy. So that when the time came, I could do more than survive. I could choose to live again. And I did. I felt the emotion rise, but I didn't hide it. I let it soften my voice. Age is not an ending. It is a mirror. And when we finally look, without flinching, without shame, we see not just the lines of time, but the strength it shaped, the choices we endured, the love we gave, the dignity we must demand. Now the room was absolutely still. I speak to every woman who has ever been told she's too old to matter, too tired to try again, too small to protect what's hers. I say, No more. We are not footnotes. We are not invisible. We are the authors of our lives. Applause began slowly, then grew. I placed both hands on the podium, grounding myself in the moment. I wear this key not as a symbol of inheritance, but of choice. I chose to unlock a version of myself I had buried in sacrifice. I chose to speak. I chose to act. I looked to the front row where Lily sat, tears in her eyes. And I am not done yet. The applause swelled, not wild, but warm, the kind of sound that feels like hands reaching across years. As I stepped down, I felt lighter. Not because the story was finished, but because finally I had told it myself. 5 years have passed. 5 years since I stood in that echoing hall, clutching Richard's key and speaking words I never imagined I'd have the strength to say. I'm 82 now, and I don't say that with apology. I say it with pride. Because I've lived every one of those years. Not just survived them, truly lived them. The Jenkins collection has grown into one of the most respected literary archives in the region. Scholars visit from all over the country. Our fellowships have supported more than 30 young researchers, exhibits, digital preservation, outreach programs for schools. It's more than I ever thought I'd be part of. And every decision, from budget to acquisitions, has passed through my hands. Lily walks the halls now with the same steady confidence Richard once had. She's been named incoming curator. The board approved it unanimously. She still asks for my opinion, but she doesn't need it. And that's what makes me proudest. Not just that she learned, but that she's surpassed me. As for Andrew, we speak. He's respectful now, careful. But the closeness we once had, the trust, it's not something you glue back together after it's been shattered. He knows that. He's stopped trying to pretend. Patricia attends the occasional gala, always a bit overdressed, always too poised. She doesn't speak much to me, but that's all right. Some silences are peaceful. My grandson's visit during holidays. Jason recently asked if he could interview me for a college project on resilience. I laughed for a long time before saying yes. Sometimes I sit alone in the special collections room. The lights dimmed low, the air cool and still, the scent of old paper and leather in the air. I trace the spine of a rare first edition and feel something stir. Not regret, but completion. It wasn't revenge that drove me. It was reclamation. I didn't take anything back that wasn't mine. I didn't fight to hurt anyone. I fought to be seen, heard, counted. And now I am. They called me Eleanor Jenkins, wife, mother, grandmother. And yes, I was all of those things, but now I am also something else. I am the architect of my future, the curator of a legacy, the final editor of my own life. There's a new plaque outside the repository. It says, The Jenkins Center for Literary Integrity. Founded in legacy, preserved through courage. And underneath, in smaller letters, dedicated to the quiet strength of women who refuse to be erased. Because that's the truth, isn't it? They tried to erase me, but I rewrote the ending. What part of this story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this story felt close to your heart, give it a like, subscribe if you want to be part of a space where real stories matter. Got a couple more minutes? Check out the next story. It's also about the things we rarely say out loud.